Hey guys, it's Britt here. So with this episode, I do want to put a content warning on here. This may be sensitive to some listeners and some viewers. It does talk about things like racism and murder, those types of things. But I do hope you guys enjoy this episode because I think it's very interesting and I think it's very important that we know about these things. So enjoy. Also, sorry, I look like a hot mess. I always look like a hot mess. I don't understand. But anyways, enjoy the episode. Alright, welcome back to the Never Normal Podcast. We're still filming this on a day. You guys know how I am. I just get cold, so I wear sweaters. I have the same shirt underneath, though. So, thank you for coming back and listening to us again, or watching us again. We introduced Meghanne in the last episode. If you haven't seen that yet, go back and watch. I will put a little link card here for YouTube. That way you guys can go back and check it out. We kind of caught up and talked about how we met and shared some of her paranormal experiences. But now we're going to kind of shift gears in the sense of we're going to talk about her paranormal tour guide stories.
Ghost tour guide.
Yeah.
Dark history guide.
Yes. Which is my flippin' dream job, first of all. I think that would be so fun. Honestly, I would love to get a haunted location and run it.
Yeah, that would be cool.
I know some people who do that, and it just seems, because I love the paranormal and entities and things, it would be so rewarding. But as that's top tier, the tier below is what the paranormal tour guides or the dark, the ghost tour guides. I think that's so interesting. So
haunted history guide.
Yeah. So you down in Chattanooga, right? That's what you do right now.
So downtown Chattanooga is like where we normally run. The one the company I'm with now, we run to, like I said in the last episode, we run an adults only tour, and then we run a kids tour, or family-friendly tour is what we call it. But, I think if you're going to take your kids on a ghost tour or haunted history tour or whatever, you need to understand that, if it's family-friendly, then likely people won't curse, and we probably won't get anything super dark, or we'll, skirt around, but you're still going to have to deal with, murder and, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It can only be so family-friendly. And really, the stories that we tell in both of them some of them are, overlap a little bit. Some of them are similar, and, we tell twice kind of thing. And then there's some that are a little bit more risque, I guess, for the adult tour. But I think they're all kind of, the same, vibe to me, personally.
And I would hope to, listen, I say I would hope, but you know how people are these days. Yeah. I would hope that if you take your children on a paranormal or a ghost tour, that you understand that there will be darker themes in that. I would think. I would hope so, but I know that's asking a lot.
I've definitely seen some reviews online on our TripAdvisor or whatever that's we took the family-friendly tour and it was really nice and our guide was great, but it was really too dark for our kids. And I'm like, what did you think it was going to be?
This isn't going to be Sesame Street.
It's not Sesame Street.
Puppets jumping out. Ooh,
people are dying. Yeah. There's a ghost tour. Something has to happen to become the ghost.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. But, my grandparents always knew, when I was a kid and they would take me, they knew, and they also knew that I could handle it, to be fair. Yeah. So, but it's a lot about the history. On my routes that I take, I've never had a paranormal experience on my routes or anything. To be fair, I just started in April approximately, and it's been light out also. So we have an 8 o'clock tour and a 9 o'clock tour, and if you're taking the 8 o'clock tour, it's not going to get dark until pretty much the end of the tour. So you know what I mean. So it's really just more for the entertainment value of the stories, which I think is also kind of cool. But like I said, I'm thinking about switching companies sometime here soon if they're if one of the local companies will take me, because they have more options. They have they have a pub crawl, and then they have a cemetery tour, and I think they have a couple others that they do outside of the regular family friendly and adult ones. Yeah. So I want more options, and I think that their company would probably take care of their people a little bit more. Yeah. I don't know anything about that. But
well, it's kind of whenever to me, when you come to that stuff, I kind of like the mom and pop shop version versus the corporate version.
Well, and the lady who runs the mom and pop one, she actually, one of the more famous haunted Chattanooga history books is written by her. Mm-hmm. So it's like, I would much rather, and she seems to be like, she really knows her stuff. She's local, like she gets it. So like, that seems like a much better gig than somebody who's a national company that's claiming things that aren't necessarily always the case. So, I'm just saying.
Biggest pet peeve.
Anyway, we'll get out of the semantics of it.
Fact versus fiction.
It's very important.
Shock factor versus
finding something on YouTube and being like, well, this might be true. Put it in the script. Yeah, no. So, like I said, I had to filter out some of the stuff that they had written in the scripts for training and everything. Our trainer was awesome. Like, the guy that came down and trained us, he was lovely. He did a great job training us and everything. Something against him. It's just, like, the company itself. People think people are a little too big for their britches, I think.
Well, I mean, you can have great people within a company and still hate the company.
For sure.
Think that's totally fair.
So, anyway, I'm thinking about going more local, but let me tell y'all, I have a couple stories picked out, and we'll give y'all some background on, like, Chattanooga itself, if y'all have never been, like, kind of the history behind it, from my understanding going forward. I'll give y'all some background, and we'll talk about a couple specific stories that we tell on the tour. I'm not going to give away everything, but we'll talk about a couple, like, ones that I think are more fun. Before I start with that, I'm going to go ahead and get to this part. Sorry. So, the girl that I knew in North Carolina that I told the last story about. And then there's another person that I met through the ghost tours, like when we were all training together. They and I, like, hit it off really well. And one of the first things they told me was that they are a descendant of Samuel Parrish. Do you know who that is? Okay. So that they were like, well, we found out from, like, a genealogy thing. It's like our great-great-great, it's like my great-great-great-great-great-great uncle, etc. Which I was like, well, that's wild. But what's even more wild is that the girl that I met in North Carolina, that's her great-great-great-great-great-great grandfather. So we have two people both related to the same person, which, like, you know, like the girl that I met in North Carolina, her last name is still in correlation. Like, that's how direct descendant that she is. And then the other one found through a genealogy test kind of thing. So I was like, what are the odds that you meet two people who are both related to Samuel Parrish?
That's so wild.
It was really weird in, like, within a, 2-year time span? So, I don't know. And they're both from the same area. Like, the girl that I met in North Carolina is actually from Knoxville, where I'm originally from. So, like, we're all from this area, and the other person that I met through the ghost tours and everything, they're a native to Chattanooga, so we all grew up in the same area around each other, and then they're both related. So, it's just weird. But that's just part of my experiences. You know, that was one of the other guides that worked for the company at the time. They don't work for it anymore, but anyway. So, let's get some background on Chattanooga. How much do you know about Chattanooga's background, history-wise?
Well,
it's okay if you don't know anything.
And it's so sad. I know some things as far as, like, the dam.
Yeah,
was
Hillsborough and everything.
And why it was built there. And kind of the railroad system, settlement, things like that. But I purposefully chose not to dive too deep.
I love it. That's okay.
Well, mainly because I have this thing where I get fixated, and
I do the same thing.
Whenever I'm going down into things like that, I will get super fixated on it, and then I would literally just be sitting here talking about it.
That's okay.
Instead of, you know what I mean?
Listening.
Yeah. And so
that's okay.
So I don't want to be.
We're learning today. You're fine.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, I love learning.
We're learning things. Yeah. So I just wanted to know if there was anything that you already knew. So we know a little bit about Hillsborough and everything. So you probably already know about the flooding and everything. Yeah?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so let's start way back when. Let's go all the way back to the first people that settled there. From what I understand, there were people who actually settled along the Cherokee River. I'm not sure what it was called during the time that these people were settling there, but originally it was the Cherokee River. Now in today's time, it's the Tennessee River. In Chattanooga, we like to just kind of like mow over history and pretend it didn't happen. That's kind of like the theme of the city.
Honestly, I think that's the
most of America.
The literal entire United States when it comes to Native people.
It's America. It's America.
It's terrible.
It's okay though. So the first people that were there were all the way back. They are traced back to 600 BC. Mm-hmm. The mound builders of the Mississippians. People have called them different things. They call them the mound builders because they would build these like great sacred mounds to house their dead in, like pyramids or like cemeteries, a little bit more like, convex.
Yeah.
But we had a mound actually in Chattanooga that housed 20,000 bodies called the SUTABLE mound.
Yes.
And I believe they mowed over that in the year 1915. And they took some artifacts, they took some like bones and everything, but the majority of it, from what I understand, got like swept into the river. They were like, let's just, Now, I could be wrong about that fact, but from what I understand, the majority of the rest of it, when they were trying to like make like because they were trying to well, and this was 1915, so like they were trying to make roads and everything, they were trying to pave over stuff, so like that's why this giant mound that housed so many bodies was just kind of into the water. Which the mounds, actually, if you look at a map of Tennessee, you can see where these natives have migrated, because there's some in Oak Ridge, there's some up here, that there's actually one that might still be up here that's still like standing that they haven't like over yet, but you can see where they've come all the way from the top of Lake Tennessee on this side all the way down, migrated into Chattanooga area, which is kind of cool. Like they followed the water down. So the mound builders, Mississippians, and then, so that's 600 BC. 1680, you have the Cherokee that moved in. The Cherokee kind of left the mounds alone because they also would build their own like burial mounds, and they were like, you know what, like probably their ancestors were also likely the mound builders and the Mississippians. Yeah. So they kind of left that stuff alone. They already knew the drill. They were being respectful, something that we don't like to do. So 1600s, we have the Cherokee that moved in. Cherokee is here for like a couple hundred years, having a good time, living by the Cherokee River. Yeah. And then you have in 1816, there was a man named John Ross who was born and came to the scene. And he was part Cherokee, part Scottish. He was 1/4 Cherokee too. So like he wasn't even like half Cherokee. I think it was on his mother's side, where his mother was like, I believe like probably part like immigrated, like, individual, like white person essentially, and then part Cherokee, and then father was full-blown Scottish from what I understand. So he wasn't even like a half Cherokee. He just had a little sprinkle in there. Sprinkle. But even with the little sprinkle, he wound up becoming the Cherokee chief of the area for a time. So just saying, it was a little weird. Interesting. He was born in what is now Rossville, Georgia, which is actually where I live currently. Love those state taxes. And then he like, he was in and out of that area, Chattanooga area, and he became Cherokee chief. So it would have been fine. He actually capitalized off the area. So he named Chattanooga, what Chattanooga is now, Ross's Landing, because you got to name it after yourself. And then
that was like the white man thing to do.
It was.
That's
He's like, Ross's Landing. He created a trading post, a warehouse, and a ferry across the Cherokee River at the time, and really capitalized off the area. So it was all fine and dandy, pretty much, until we have the earlier 1816. So 1820s approximately, they're starting to write up the information to remove the Indian Removal Act. Remember? Yes. So Andrew Jackson, who was the president at the time, he was fairly close with Mr. John Ross, and they were a little bit of like a butt buddy situation, from what I understand. And once this was written up and put into action, John Ross had to lead his own people, the people that he grew up with, the nation that he literally was raised in. He had to remove his own Cherokee people from Ross's Landing at the time. And he let out 4,000 Cherokees behind him out of Chattanooga from where they'd been living for hundreds of years.
There's something that really just chaps my ass about the whole Native people's situation and everything. And like, it's such a scary thing to talk about, but I think it's so important that we recognize that.
Well, they're still struggling today with things that are happening. You know what I mean? A lot of the natives are. So It gets into a weird area because the Indian Removal Act and like the Trail of Tears that occurred, it's still affecting the Native people to this day, which is very upsetting. And it all started on Market Street in Chattanooga, Tennessee. So
damn, Chattanooga.
So we're already getting a little dark. There's a lot of like issues already happening with the city. So like I said, 4,000 Cherokee were removed from Ross's Landing, which is now Chattanooga at the time. And it was 16,000 natives in total left for the Trail of Tears, and 4,000 to 6,000 did not survive the trip. So pretty much as much, if not more, than who left Chattanooga did not survive the trek, which is a lot of bloodshed. So that's where we're starting. So we've started there. So John Ross, we'll go ahead and get into Mr. John Brown. So John Ross actually has a brother-in-law whose name is John Brown. You'll know we have a bunch of Johns in our tour, and I think it's simply because they were not very creative at the time, you know. So John Brown was also a Scottish Cherokee man. I think he was he had a little bit more Cherokee blood in him than John Ross did, from what I understand, and he was John Ross's brother-in-law. John Brown was actually in the Chattanooga area longer than John Ross was. In fact, he had a tavern that he had established and a ferry that he'd established. We have a Brown's Ferry Tavern and Brown's Ferry. Brown's Ferry Tavern still exists to this day on Lookout Mountain in Chattanooga. It is the oldest building in Chattanooga that hasn't been moved from its original location.
Wow.
So I haven't been up to it yet, but it's really cool. I'll send you some pictures if you want to add them in or anything. Of like his tavern and everything. So he was really upset with his brother-in-law, obviously, that this was about to happen, because John Brown, he established his tavern in 1806, and then he left for the War of 1812 to go fight in it, and then when he came back, he found out that his brother-in-law, after he's been fighting in a war, that his brother-in-law is taking their own people out of, you know, their homeland, and he's pissed about it, frankly.
Rightfully so.
So if we want to take a little break, I'll tell you all the rest of the story after it, because it looks like, are we on 3 minutes?
Yeah.
All right, that's okay. We'll come back and talk about Mr. John Brown in a minute. All right.
Welcome back, everybody. We took a short couple of breaths there, because we're getting into some pretty deep things. And we're going to pick right up where we left off with John Brown. John Brown.
Very generic name, but he was a real person. So this is all history, by the way. We haven't even really gotten to the ghost story aspect necessarily. This is all just like the dark history of the area. So John Brown, like I said, brother-in-law John Ross, we talked about that in the last half. And so he'd come back after he fought in the War of 1812 to find that his brother-in-law would lead his own people out of Chattanooga, or Ross's Landing at the time, you know, unjustly.
Real dick move, other John.
Real dick move. And John Brown even went to his brother-in-law and was like begging him and like, please, you know, you can't do this to them. Like, you have to talk Andrew Jackson out of this. And John Ross was just like, gotta get that bag, you know what I'm saying?
I know, he's stuffing that cash in his pockets like, dude, I can't do anything.
I'm only 1/4 Cherokee, okay?
Yeah, he's like, I just got a sprinkle in there.
I don't sprinkle. So, anyway, long story short, Trail of Tears happened, John Brown, pissed. So he was like, well, if I can't do anything to fix it or change it, I'm going to start getting a little bit of revenge for it. So he decides to utilize the two assets that he had created, his tavern and his ferry, that he used to like ferry people across the Cherokee River and everything. He would start targeting. So now we have a lot of like white people, settlers coming in, like white merchants coming in that are unfamiliar with the land. You know, this is a new area and they're just here to sell their goods and do this, that, and the other. And so John Brown like will convince, like they'll come on this ferry and then he'll convince them like on the trip over, you know, hey, I got this really nice tavern. You know, you can come have a nice warm drink, a nice warm bed, get you some food in your stomach. We'll talk about like some ghost stories. You know, like he would tell them Cherokee legends of like the Dakwa, which is like our local like Loch Ness monster. We call it's called the sucking fish. Thanks to the French that named a whole area of the river down there Le Suc. So the sucking fish.
I do remember that.
You're like, actually,
that
I
name
do.
haunts me.
The Dakwa. So we tell them stories like that, which they were really enamored by because they were, you know, they'd never heard of a lot of these legends. This was all new to them. So while he was like bringing them over, entertaining them at his like tavern and everything, he'd have his little work boys go through their belongings. So like go through their horses' bags and like their personal items and see who had like the most expensive like stuff, like who like which merchants, you know, had the nice stuff. So once he had someone picked out, they would get like a one-way ticket down to John Brown's basement in that tavern.
Oh wow,
they
sounds
would
like a poppin' place.
Definitely one-way ticket though, because so he'd bring them down, and he would essentially like after they'd fallen asleep, and he'd like, I don't know if he drugged them or not necessarily, but he would find a way to get them down into the basement after they'd fallen asleep, from what I understand, and then he would torture them into their death. He would dismember them. Ooh. And then he would throw their body parts into the Cherokee River, as well as, and if you like animals, you're going to hate this, I'm sorry, but if that person had like a horse or a dog, because horses and dogs have papers, they can be tracked. So if they had like an animal like that, he would also kill that animal and throw it into the river, which is unfortunate, and that's the part that really made me sad. Not the humans being murdered, the horses and the dogs made me sad.
Not the colonizers.
Not the colonizers.
The animals.
The animals. They didn't do anything. They were simply just living. So that part made me sad. But he killed upwards of 30 individuals that were aware. Wow. So that makes him Chattanooga's first serial killer.
And you know, you would never know that.
No.
That's so crazy. And
I had never heard of it.
And you talk about that on your on your tour. Wow.
So that's one of the stops we do. I talk about it on both tours, just because I think originally we had like the witches of Chattanooga, but they were like a little bit like
campy,
iffy. They weren't even really that interesting of a story, and none of them were based in fact. I couldn't find anything to back them up, so I was like, I don't know. But they didn't have the John Brown serial killer story, and I was like, I'm putting that in, because one of our other tour guides suggested it, and then I looked more into it, and I was like, oh, I'm doing that story instead.
Especially because it's documented. Like, that's
history. That's more scary than this witch who messed in people's love lives that probably wasn't even real.
Well,
you know?
and not only that, but you've got this man, and he's hurt by his people.
Genuinely, he has motive.
But, like, he's so torn, you know? Like,
very dark Robin Hood energy to me.
Yeah. Like, Robin Hood, like, turn the dial, like,
all the way up. So that's John Brown and John Ross. That's, like, our original, like, starting point. So let's talk a little bit more about the background of Chattanooga itself in terms of like original history, and then I'm going to jump over into a very specific story about the Walnut Street Bridge that I really want to talk about in this podcast, because I think it's like, in my opinion, the most important story out of the ones I'm going to tell. I'm going to leave it for last. So let's stay with the natives real quick. Stay with the theme. So, back in 1775, we're going all the way back, there was a man named Dragging Canoe. Have you heard of him?
Yes.
Okay. So, Dragging Canoe. So, Dragging Canoe, he was a Cherokee warrior as well. He lived, from what I understand, in the upper part of Lake Tennessee that borders Kentucky. And he was brutal. He was a brutal warrior. His whole goal in life was to keep the white settlers from taking the Cherokees' land. Like, that was like his thing.
I would have donated.
He was all for it, man, and he did not play. Now, at the time, in 1775, there was a territory being, like, bargained with called the Transylvania Territory that included that lower part of Kentucky, upper part of Tennessee.
Yes, I have heard of that.
Okay, so I don't actually know the reason behind why they called it the Transylvania Territory, but that's what it was referred to as when it was being, like, purchased off.
Vampires, man.
Vampires. So,
maybe that's
no
where
correlation.
Twilight originated, not Washington.
Tennessee. That would be a whole different plotline.
It'd be Y'all Light instead of Twilight.
Y'all Light.
Alright,
anyway, so he was trying to fight off these people who were trying to sell the Transylvania Territory, because that was his home. Like, that's where he grew up and everything.
Right.
And he was like,
rightfully so, yeah.
Screw you guys. Like, I'm going to fight y'all off and keep my land. But unfortunately, he did not succeed in that endeavor. So he was super pissed. Fair enough. And before he left, he told them, if you purchase this territory, it will be dark and bloody and cursed. And some people call it Dragging Canoe's curse. And some people say that wherever Dragging Canoe goes, that wherever, like, the white settlers try to take the Cherokee's land or his people's land, that curse also follows. That's the lore, the legend, whatever. So he, is like, essentially, screw y'all. I'm going to take the people who believe in the things that I believe in, and we're going to go down and find a new home. So he took all of his like followers and believers, and they went with him down to what was, eventually Ross's Landing, that area, what is now Chattanooga, and he created the Chickamauga people. So if you see the Chickamauga signs, Chickamauga natives, they are dragging canoes people. From what I understand, he created them. So that's kind of neat. But a lot of people say that Chattanooga is cursed because Dragging Canoe came down here with his people, settled and everything, and then you have the Trail of Tears.
And then the white man came and...
I see it as like a form of... So the reason people say that too is because 30 years after the Trail of Tears, we have this severe flooding that happened in Chattanooga.
Yeah.
Like horrific flooding. Like we had businesses in the water, homes in the water, family members in the water.
Yeah.
Which, is very ironic because we literally just took out the original people from their homeland and now we are also being displaced. So
Rightfully
there's something, rightfully so. There's something very ironic to me about that being like coinciding within 30 years of that happening. Mm-hmm. And then the floods happened on and off for a very long time. Chattanooga is actually a couple stories up. So like most of the older buildings, if you're walking into them, second floor, not the first floor you're walking in on. So like, the original first floor and basements are actually underneath the concrete of Chattanooga, and we have a tunnel system that runs throughout Chattanooga because of that. Because like HVAC workers and maintenance workers sometimes have to get down there, and they're really the only ones who have access. But the floods did a lot of damage. We had a hotel downtown called the Reed House at one point. That's also a haunted hotel.
I have heard of the Reed House.
The Reed House. It is one of the most haunted buildings in my opinion in Chattanooga. But originally it was a different hotel who, I know the name of it, it'll come to me, hold on. It was a different hotel originally, it starts with a C, Crutchfield House. The Crutchfield House was originally in that spot. It was a Civil War hospital on the lower parts of it for a while. It burnt down, and then when we had the floodings after it had been rebuilt and turned into the Reed House, I think it was like 4 or 5 stories up when it flooded, it reached that level, and a lot of the people that were inside of the hotel were trapped inside. So there was a dude with a boat that was like, I'll come get y'all. He comes in, gets everyone, and then he is like, you know what? This is such a good idea. I'm going to capitalize off of it. So then he starts taking people on tours of Chattanooga as if we're like Venice, Italy. And the boat starts in the Reed House. Like that was like their starting location. So they take people up and then go around. So that was like just kind of like a fun fact about it. But so a lot of people think that it's cursed because of Dragging Canoe and the flooding and everything. A lot of people have that connotation of it. I say it's a city. You're going to have a lot of crime. You're going to have a lot of issues. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Like, it's a beautiful city, but it's still a city. And stuff happens. Karma happens too. So, like,
it's kind of one of those...
I'll leave it up for interpretation.
It's one of those where it could very well be like, when they took the natives from their land, that could have enacted and that's where that flooding came from, as a form of, you take some of mine, I'm going to take some of yours.
And also think about it, these natives were probably propagating the river area and using that as like their food, their food source, growing their food.
Nature, water, everything's very sacred to native people.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying, like, if you want to think logically about it, if you remove the people who like propagated the area next to the water that has probably kept it from flooding for who knows how long,
and you get a bunch of,
and then you take them out, and then that's not happening
that don't know what they're doing.
Then of course it's going to flood. You know what I'm saying?
They had no idea. What's
that's just taking superstition out of it, like, but still, I think it's
on the realistic
side. I really do think it's a karmatic situation. Yeah. But that's just me personally. That's my opinion.
Yeah.
So, all right. So if you want to like do one more quick break before my last like tour guide story, I would love to, because I think this is a good stopping point.
Yeah. So, for sure.
That's the end of the natives for now.
Yeah. No. And I do want to say that a lot of people in this area, we really do recognize the wrongdoings. At least the people that I've come into contact with. I mean, you got some of your yeehaw people that they really don't care. But
and a lot of people are also still like mixed with their ancestry is native around here. A lot of people, So
yeah, we do have where my mother grew up was the birthplace of Sequoia. And they do have a lot of, the Cherokee people in the area have a lot of festivals and things like that. And the Sequoia Birthplace Museum is an amazing. Like I told you,
I really want to see it now that you're talking about it.
You definitely need to go. It's beautiful. A lot of history artifacts, a lot of authentic things that actually, pertain to the real Native history. So yeah, but we are going to take a break and then we'll finish out. If you're still here, thanks.
Thank you so much. I know I talk for a long time. I hope you're enjoying it.
It's all very like detailed things.
Well, and Native history is America's history. So if you don't care about the Natives' history, then you don't care about America, do you?
Yeah.
I'm not trying to be controversial. I'm just saying, like, if you don't care about the first people that were here, then you don't really care about the place or respect the place that you're living.
Yeah, and I very much feel the same way as well. Like, I will get in very heated discussions with people on this. But yeah, we're gonna take a quick break, and then we'll round out with one more story.
See you soon.
We'll be right back. We're back for one more tale of our Chattanooga tour, guys. See, I don't even need to go now. I've had a tour right here.
Oh, I can tell you all the stories, not on here.
No, but Casey and I, when you do get settled, like if you do decide to go to another, we definitely want to do
even if you all want to come down and just want a personal tour, I'll do it.
Yeah,
I don't care.
Like I want to go stay in the Reed House and definitely want to go down and do a actual YouTube video of the ghost tours and just kind of get some more, because I think that stuff is so cool, but I also think it's important because there's a lot of history in those tours. So I think for us to preserve the history, it's really important that we
it's super important.
Tell the history.
Especially Chattanooga's history, because I'm going to be honest, and it's unfortunate because I love that city, but at the same time, it's such, that city in particular, which I say in particular, a lot of them, especially in the South, they were never kind usually to people of color or natives or, you know what I mean? Yeah. So there's a lot of the stories we tell are based in cruelty to those people, you know what I mean? And that's so unfortunate, but it's very much a part of our history, and I think it should be preserved.
And I think it's important to recognize that and to recognize, how, you treated these people terribly, but we need to learn and restructure from that. I think that's very important, especially in today's day and age. I mean, it should never have been a thing. Yeah. Of course.
Well, if we forget our history, we repeat our history.
Yes. So that is one of my biggest, I stand up on that pedestal all the time. It's so important to me, and that's why, again, I really love these tours because they're very historical and they're very they are dark, and they talk about uncomfortable things like the Trail of Tears. It's a very uncomfortable thing.
Super uncomfortable.
But Native voices and Native history is so important. And then it's the same thing, with slavery and stuff like that. Like, people of color, their voices are so important, but it's also important to learn their history and what those people went through. And what they still go through.
And I also want to preface all of this that I'm saying with, these are the stories that I have researched, that I have looked into, that I have heard words of mouth from from locals and everything. So if I get certain facts or anything off, or if I'm not 100% correct about dates and times, I am sorry. I am not perfect. I have tried my best to be as accurate as possible. Yeah. I'm just saying, if there's something that that I've said that's incorrect, feel free to correct me also, because I would like to know. But
and I admire there's an openness in that. That's
well, I'm not going to say that what I'm saying is 100% I can't make mistakes. My brain is always worrying. So if I get a date or a name a little bit skewed, or a situation a little bit out of context, just know that I've done my research. That doesn't mean that I'm 100% correct in everything, but I want to be open to criticism from the stories,
there's always an opportunity to learn in that, too.
100%.
Which I think is important. But we're going to do one more story.
Yep.
I'm interested in this one. I don't know why. I just have a feeling.
So this is the darkest one in my opinion. Not that the Trail of Tears isn't dark, because it absolutely is. That's a lot of bodies. But I think this one, and I want to send you a picture for this one as well. So if you can get it on there, great. Just to put things into perspective. So this one in particular is about Chattanooga's Walnut Street Bridge, which is our famous walking bridge. Cars cannot go on it. You know, it's one of the biggest walking bridges in the U.S., I believe, as well. And the thing about this bridge too is, like, if you see the town's name, Chattanooga, you see that bridge behind it in like a graphic design. That's the bridge you see when you see Chattanooga. We use it as, it's like the pinnacle of our city. Like, it's our namesake. It's all everything, you know, we've based off of that.
You see it driving into Chattanooga.
You do.
Yes.
I mean,
I have seen it.
It's insanely huge. It's a beautiful bridge, but it has an incredibly dark history. Now, originally, there was just a little memorial placard next to it, like a tiny one. Now they have a full memorial next to it on the side that this incident happened on, and I think they've done a lot better of a job. I think they've installed it earlier this year, so it's fairly new still. It's very nice. Whole memorial statue and everything. So we're going to be talking about the Ed Johnson story. You may have heard of it. You may not have. When I'd moved here, I'd never heard of it before.
I'd never heard of it.
I think I'm a little frustrated that people haven't. I'm frustrated that I haven't heard of it before, you know. And it was also not in our script for this tour company at all. In fact, one of the other tour guides are the one that's like, "We're not doing the Ed Johnson story." And I was like, "What's the Ed Johnson story?" She's like, "You don't know the Ed Johnson story?" I was like, "No, I don't. Inform me," you know.
Yeah.
So I did my own research. I read the newspaper article that came out about it and everything too. So I'm doing my best with it. Bear with me. It's also something that I want to trigger warning real quick, because trigger warning to racial issues. Okay. And obviously death, because, you know, it's a ghost story. So just understand that, like, I'm going to do my best interpreting it. Everything I talk about is as factual as I was able to find. So Ed Johnson, his story actually starts with a woman named Nevada Taylor in the year 1906, I believe. Now, Nevada Taylor was a local in Chattanooga. She lived out there. I believe she had some little, like, job that she worked out during the day, and then she would go meet her father, who worked as a local groundskeeper for a cemetery, at night to, like, go walk with him home. You know what I'm saying? So she was leaving, you know, her work to go to her father's work so they could walk home. It was dark out. I'm sure there was a lot less lighting than there is now. And on the way there, also trigger warning a little bit for, you know, physical aggression and sexual aggression. Okay. Because on her way home, she was assaulted pretty horrifically. Okay. Now, the story goes that she had passed out during the whole ordeal, and she came to, from what I read, 10 minutes later, and then walked to her father and explained what had happened, essentially. I'm sure she was in tears and super upset and freaked out and everything. She was, you know, a younger woman, and I'm sure had never had that kind of experience before. Very traumatic. So she walks to her father's work. When he finds out what happened to her, he takes her to the local police station to fill out a report, and then he takes her to, you know, the hospital to see if she's okay physically. And the hospital report comes back that she was assaulted in the way that they thought she was assaulted. And then now she's being interrogated to find out who did this to her. They're like, "Can we get, like, clothing, voice, like, can you give us any physical descriptions of the person?" She was like, "It was a man. They were wearing black. That's all I know." That's all I got. It was dark. I don't know. Right. And so this kind of frustrates the local sheriff at the time, because he had his own agenda going on, and he was really trying to, like, go after the people of color in the, you know, area at the time. So he was really trying to fish for, like, what's the skin color of this dude, you know? And she was like, "I don't know. It was dark." And that, you know, pissed him off a little bit. So he had his own thing going on during this whole ordeal. Now, they started to pull money in. So $350 were pulled in to find any information about who assaulted Miss Taylor. Now, lots of people came forward with different things, but, like, nothing really added up for a while. Nobody had a name or anything until one local came forward with the name Ed Johnson. Now, Ed Johnson was a local carpenter at the time. And he kind of worked on, like, the taverns of the area, like roofs and, like, you know, the inside furniture and everything he would fix or, like, make new for them. So a lot of people, I think, in Chattanooga knew who he was. And he was a black man in the area and, you know, just was living his life. He wasn't doing nothing. Now, like I said, $350 were pulled in. That's $12,000 of our money. So that's a lot of money, you know, in the time frame and everything. So when this man came forward with the name and took off with the $350, now they kind of have to go after Ed Johnson because they don't have any other information, and now they don't have any money. So Ed Johnson was put on trial. Miss Taylor had to, you know, give her own recording of the events. They, like, pressured her really hard to say his name during the trial, and, like, she is recorded to have burst into tears on the stand after they were like, well, it's this man, right? Say it's this man. What is his name? Say it's his name, you know, trying to get something out of her. And she's, like, bursting into tears, and she's like, this was her quote from her. I do not want to convict an innocent man to death. I do not know, essentially, who did this to me. So, like, I don't know what their skin color was. I don't know, was what she was trying to explain to them.
Yeah.
And they were adamant, no, it had to be him, it had to be him, it had to be him. Well, 12 witnesses came forward stating that they were either with him or knew where he was the night that Miss Taylor was assaulted. There was zero evidence to state that he was even remotely near the area that this had happened to her.
Oh,
there was no evidence. In fact, there was 12 people showing counter evidence. However, the jury was still going towards a guilty verdict. So,
well, they wanted someone to blame.
Yeah, of course they did. Well, things were getting really hot and heavy and upsetting, and Ed Johnson's father, he knew his son was innocent, and he was like, you know, I really, I gotta find a way to fix this. I gotta find a way to save my son. So, now, I could be wrong about where he went, but from my understanding, he went to Nashville, and there were these two, it was either Nashville, I need to fact check this. I don't remember where he went to go get these two lawyers. It was either Nashville or it was like DC. And I'm going to be honest, I can't remember which one. So don't clock me on where he got them from, okay? But there were these two black lawyers who were very prominent in their area. They were very good at what they did. And he went to go essentially beg them to come help his son. To come, you know, be his, you know, lawyers. And at first they were like, you know, we have our families. And like, I mean, these two people of color who have their own families, have their own lives, and don't want to go into an area where...
Walking into a lion's den, really.
Quite genuinely, you know, especially because they're here to take the assaulter off, you know, make him not guilty. So, like, this is really awkward, you know, like, very uncomfortable, very much like they're risking their own lives to come help him.
Oh, yes, they targets on their back.
And their families' lives. So, you know, this was a big decision for them to make, but eventually they actually did decide they would come down to help Ed Johnson.
Okay.
They came down and they did a damn good job. They did an amazing job. They actually were starting to overturn that guilty verdict to a not guilty sentencing, and he was going to walk free. Ed Johnson was going to be okay in the long run at this time. But because of that, like I said, the local sheriff was just an asshole. Just an awful asshole. And he was very upset that things were turning around in favor of Mr. Johnson. So he decided to start manipulating, which I'm sure didn't take a lot, but like manipulating and like convincing the locals to get together and form a mob because, oh, you know, the assaulter is going to get away with assaulting this little woman, this poor little white woman, you know what I mean?
Oh my gosh.
So he used that to get these people on his side, which I'm sure it didn't take much for some of these people, but, you know, he used that to get them on his side, and then they went to the Hamilton County Jail, which is where Mr. Johnson was being held at the time. He was being held on the upper floor, from what I understand, and they came to quite genuinely, and they did, break down the doors to that jail to take Mr. Johnson and do what they wanted with him. So they broke down the doors to this jail. They went all the way up to the top floor, which at this time when the doors were broken down, from what I understand and like, you know, the story, how the story goes, Mr. Johnson had like one other cellmate that was like not in his cell, but like adjacent to him that they could like speak and everything. And when they heard them knocking down the doors, they all knew who these people were coming for. They knew they were coming for Mr. Johnson. Like this was the big story. Yeah. So his cellmate looked over at him and said, "Time to start praying."
Yeah.
As the tale goes, Mr. Johnson had his blanket wrapped around his shoulders, and he was rocking back and forth in his cell, reciting Psalms 23 over and over again. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, the Lord is my shepherd.
Yeah.
And he just kept repeating that prayer over and over and over again, because he knew that this would probably be the end, and he was kind of like trying to take comfort in what he could at that point. Like, there was, I mean, I don't even know what, I can't even imagine being put in that place to even have to think about my inevitable death from people who hate me so much and I've done nothing wrong, you know?
Yeah.
Like, how horrific. So these people, they make it up to the second floor where he's being held. They break down the bars to his cell. Mm-hmm. They tie his hands up and they drag him 16 blocks to the Walnut Street Bridge on the side that the Hunter Museum and Hunter Mansion sit on currently. Mm-hmm. They drug him to that side, and as a mob, they were having different discussions of what they should do with him. Finally, they decided to hang him from the bridge, and they did. They hung him from the bridge, and there's discrepancies on this part, but from what I understand, he hung from the bridge until his rope snapped. He dropped to the ground, and then the sheriff came with a few of his guys, came all the way down to where he dropped, and was probably already dead. Mm-hmm. And they shot him 50 times just to make sure.
That's so disgusting.
So, the thing about that story, too, is Ed Johnson was not the first man of color that was hung from that bridge and killed.
Yeah.
He's just the one that we have, one of the few that we have a name for. We have a few of the other names,
a lot of
but
documentation, and
there was not a lot.
That's so terrible.
So, I'll tell you, too, from what I understand, the reason they would take these individuals to this bridge in particular to hang them from, because there were other areas they could have done this to, was because that this was the one walking bridge where, again, I could be wrong about this. This is what I've heard from locals. This is the research I've done, so this is what I know. On the mansion side, the Hunter Museum and mansion side, were like the rich area of Chattanooga at the time. They were the wealthy people. On the other side of the bridge were the not so wealthy people and a lot of the people of color. So they would walk across the bridge every single day to get to work. And what would they have to see on that route?
Set examples.
A warning, so that if you don't act in line with us, we'll do this to you too.
Oh, that's so
horrific.
I'm gonna break for a minute here. That's so fucking disgusting.
No, it is. It makes me so mad, but it's a story that I don't like to tell it. It's not a fun story. It's a very disturbing story, but I think it's important to tell. I tell it on both tours. I think it's important to tell because, you know...
It shows you just how deep racism is.
It is, and how much we like to cover it up even to this day when we have a memorial right next to it talking about the history of the bridge, and half of the people that walk by it have no fucking clue. No clue.
So terrible.
Every single time, like, I'll ask people, I'll be like, hey, have you walked across the Walnut Street Bridge on your trip this so far? Oh, yeah, we have. Have you seen the memorial? Yeah, we've seen the memorial. Do you know what it's about? No. Yeah. Locals don't even know. I'm like, not all of them, obviously, but a lot of them, and I'm like, I bet you, and it's obviously a lot of the, you know, paler skinned individuals that don't always know the story. A lot of the people of color tend to know, obviously, you know, the story, of course. That's, you know, part of their history, so, but it's also part of our history. It's just our history that we don't like to talk about. We may not have done it, but you know what I'm saying, like, it should be acknowledged, so.
For sure. I definitely feel that sentiment. So, but yeah, well, thank you so much for sharing these stories and stuff with us. I think they're very important. Chattanooga has a lot of history, a lot of dark history. The South has a lot of dark history.
I mean, this is just scratching the surface.
Yeah.
There's so much more I could talk about, but it would take another 50,000 podcasts, so.
Well, we'll definitely have you back where we can, like, hit on those things and everything.
Sure.
I will post her socials below. Go give her a follow. Check us out on Anchor, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and of course YouTube. Consider supporting us. If you go to Anchor, there's a support option, and that's where we're gonna kind of dive into like getting more equipment and doing some more like actual paranormal investigations and stuff. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Much.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, it's been really fun so far, and she'll be back. Don't worry, she'll definitely be back. But we will see you guys next time, guys. Thanks a lot.
Bye.